They heard me say it. I said that. If I was on there, I said that.
Turn around, please. You did not.
Shekinah, you stopped them and I said the same. You asked me, do you think I'm happier that you asked me the question and I answered it? So why would you sit there and say that?
Because I am happy.
But why would you sit there and say that I ain't say that?
Because you did.
I think she's happy. Yes, I did.
It wasn't loud and clear.
Tell me.
Yeah?
Tell me what's going on out there. What's going on?
The Atlanta city didn't sleep. Neon flickered, timelines refreshed, and a rumor detonated like a siren in the night. According to posts flying across social feeds, a cache of supposed files, screenshots, clinic-style forms, private chat logs, even a grainy voice clip had surfaced and pointed at a story bigger than gossip. The claim, a close friend of the household was allegedly pregnant, and whispers online said the well-known rapper at the center of a famous family might be involved. No one agreed on what was real, but everyone agreed on one thing: the internet had found its next obsession. Hashtags multiplied in minutes. Some rallied behind the spouse, demanding transparency. Others dove into timeline archaeology, matching rumored dates with hotel check-ins, studio sessions, and blurry photos someone swore were proof. Every scroll added another thread, another hot take, another exclusive that looked more like speculation than certainty. Still, the emotional undercurrent was unmistakable. People who'd watched this family for years felt personally invested, like they were watching a house they knew catch fire in slow motion. Then the conversation shifted from curiosity to confrontation. Clip after clip replayed the spouse's past interviews and public moments, measuring every smile and silence against the rumor of the hour. Commenters didn't just want answers, they wanted accountability. The narrative hardened. If the claims had any truth, someone owed the family and the fans an explanation. And if it was all smoke, someone had set off a false alarm big enough to burn reputation.
In control. You said that.
Let me ask somebody who know me for real, right? Who really know me.
Man, I'm gonna tell you what you want to hear.
I think you happy.
Do you think I'm like, from
what she got?
I think she's happy. I think she's happy.
The video ain't really the issue. The video being posted up on social media is the issue. If someone would have sent her that video privately, she and I would have had one conversation about it, and it would have been over.
By sunrise, the feeds weren't talking about art or accolades. They were counting alleged receipts. Threads mapped timelines down to hour marks. Influencers stitched reactions to reactions, driving the story higher in the algorithm. Silence from the inner circle didn't calm anything. It made the speculation feel louder, like the pause before a verdict. Whatever came next wouldn't be a rumor passed in DMs, it would be a demand in public for proof. But the internet wasn't prepared for who made that demand or how. She stepped forward before anyone else could frame the story for her. No entourage, no slick statement, just a mic, a trembling breath, and a line that cut through the noise. She wanted clarity. Not later, not privately, now. She asked for a DNA test on record, calling it a matter of dignity and a promise to her children that they'd always get the truth, no matter how inconvenient. It wasn't a performance, it was posture. Shoulders squared, voice wavering, but steady enough to land. That moment turned the timeline. The crowd stopped arguing about theories and started orbiting a single undeniable request: proof. Clips of her wiping tears with a crumpled tissue looped across platform. Comment sections filled with people who saw their own history in her expression. The midnight arguments, the second guessing, the quiet calculations you make when the person you trust suddenly feels like a stranger. She didn't ask for sympathy, she asked for verification. That's what made it powerful. The reaction was immediate. Overnight, she shifted from celebrity spouse to a stand-in for anyone who'd been blindsided by whispers they never wanted to hear. Journalists moved from rhetoric to logistics. How fast could results be processed? What would be admissible? Who had custody of what? The fans, meanwhile, turned into archivists, pulling timestamps, matching destinations, overlaying dates like they were building a case. One detail lingered: the way she looked beyond the cameras after speaking, as if talking to someone who wasn't there. Not an accusation, an ultimatum to the truth itself. If the story was smoke, it would clear. If it was fire, the city was about to see flames. Either way, the next beat wasn't a speech. It was what the internet craves when words run out: receipts. First came the screenshot. Everyone argued about the kind that looks official enough to trend but blurry enough to doubt. It was presented as a clinic-style record with dates, codes, and a projected conception window circled in red. Commenters claimed that window overlapped a weekend linked online to a boutique hotel where the rapper was said to have stayed. It wasn't proof, but it was gasoline. Threads formed like case file, booking rumors, tagged location, grainy lobby footage that might be him depending on who paused the frame. Media pages pivoted fast. Morning shows floated careful language, alleged document, purported timeline, unverified claims, while reaction channels dropped thumbnails with arrows and question marks. Meanwhile, the rapper's socials went still. No post, no caption, no denial. That quiet didn't settle anything. It agitated everyone. To a hungry feed, silence reads like a smirk. Then a new batch of screenshots arrived, allegedly from the friend's private messages. The tone was frantic, talk of fallout. If any test went public, of families wrecked and careers on the line. Some readers called it manipulation, others panicked. But the takeaway was the same. If those messages were real, the stakes weren't just personal, they were existential. By now, the conversation had outgrown gossip. Commenters weren't debating whether a rumor sounded plausible. They were asking what happens when a family demands verification and the internet demands a verdict. And once those questions reach lawyers, there's only one place they can be answered on the record, which is why the next chapter didn't unfold on a timeline. It unfolded in a courthouse. Courthouse mornings are loud in a strangely quiet way. Footsteps whispered, updates, cameras clicking like rain. By the time doors opened, the steps were a theater. Handwritten signs, phone tripods, people holding their breath for a headline. Inside, it was colder. Wooden benches, fluorescent hum, that heavy stillness you feel right before the first gavel. They entered in sequence. The spouse first, tissues in hand, jaw set, eyes swollen but clear. Then the friend flanked by security, expression caught somewhere between resolve and regret. Finally, the rapper, no swagger, no shades, just a stare that kept finding the floor. It wasn't a trial of guilt or innocence in any legal sense yet, but the air had already picked sides. Even the court clerk seemed to turn pages more carefully, like noise itself could shatter something fragile. When the case was announced, names withheld here, but everyone knew who was who. There was a ripple through the room, that collective inhale a crowd makes when a story they followed from their couches suddenly moves into a space with consequences. The attorney spoke in measured syllables: verification, chain of custody, admissibility. Online, those phrases sound clinical. In person, they feel like countdown. You could read the room in glances. The spouse didn't look at the rapper at all, only at the bench and briefly at the friend with a look that wasn't anger so much as calculation, like mapping the route through a burning house. The friend kept her hands locked, fingers white at the knuckle. The rapper's stillness read like armor. Behind them, rows of spectators, blended press, fans, and people who just wanted to say they were there when it happened. A bailiff adjusted a speaker cart near the evidence screen. The motion felt small until you remembered what everyone was whispering about: a recording. If it played, it wouldn't just be a clip in a feed, it would be a timestamp in a transcript. The judge leaned forward. The lawyers exchanged nods. A light blinked red on the console, and the room braced for the moment the rumor machine either collapsed or crowned itself king. The first seconds were almost nothing, static, the scrape of a chair, a voice too muffled to place. Then the tone sharpened. According to what listeners in the room later repeated online, a familiar cadence cut through the fuzz, low and careful, promising to handle it if the situation ever spilled into daylight. No names in the clip, no explicit confession, just enough familiarity to make the gallery tilt forward and hold its breath. Words that could be read 3 different ways, but each one worse than the last. The spouse didn't need the whole file. One phrase was enough. Shoulders flinched, then locked. A hand pressed to her chest like trying to keep something from breaking loose. People talk about proof like it's cold and clinical. In real life, it's heat rising off faces, tightening throats, burning through any script you rehearsed on the way in. A reporter's pen stopped moving mid-scratch. Even the judge waited a beat before instructing counsel to continue. Behind that stillness was lightning. Post from inside the room said the spouse stood and, voice shaking, called the words a knife, not evidence but injury. She didn't swing at anyone with it, she just let it hang there heavy and visible. The friend kept her eyes down, mouthing something no one could read. The rapper stayed stone quiet, which only made the moment feel louder. Outside, the courthouse steps turned into a split screen of the city's conscience. On one side, chants for the spouse, truth, dignity, accountability. On the other, condemnation of the friend, accusations that turned into slogans, slogans that turned into noise. Police shifted the barricades a few inches at a time. Commentators went live from the sidewalk, printing instant narratives while the ink was still wet. Inside, counsel tried to steer the room back to procedure, chain of custody, authentication, the usual scaffolding around a shaky file. But you can't put the internet back into a folder. Once people think they've heard a private promise made public, every pause sounds like strategy. Every blink looks like calculation. Every no comment becomes a confession written in negative space. By afternoon, the feed had more editorials than facts. Some said the recording proved intent. Others argued it was nothing but a stitched rumor with a convincing echo. What no one disagreed on was the consequence. There was only one piece of information that could stop the speculation from eating everything it touched, and that answer wouldn't come from a microphone. It would come from an envelope. The clerk's hand shook as he slid a single sheet from a manila envelope. The room went silent in that way only courtrooms can, like the air itself was waiting for permission to move. According to attendees who later posted their accounts, the words were simple and clinical, the kind a lab uses when it has nothing to add except a number. The conclusion as it spread online was framed as near certain, a verdict the internet could understand without legal training. Silence broke the way glass glass does. The spouse staggered as if the floor tipped, catching herself with a palm to the bench. A whisper turned into a tremor that raced through the rows and burst at the doors. Inside, counsel argued to place language on the record with precision. Outside, precision didn't stand a chance. Headlines shortened it to one line and turned that line into fuel. Tags exploded across platforms. Users who hadn't posted in years found a password so they could join the chorus. The friend, by different reports, crumpled in on herself and tried to explain something to no one in particular. How promises can sound like futures. How futures can collapse into a single sentence. The spouse, steadier now, didn't meet her eyes. She aimed her gaze at the front of the room, not to plead, but to anchor. The rapper remained a study in stillness, the kind that refuses to give a frame the reaction it wants. For cameras, that plays like indifference. For people who knew the stakes, it looked like a person trying not to split in half. By late afternoon, another clip made the rounds, allegedly recorded before the hearing, allegedly showing laughter over logistics and a shrug at consequences. The feed treated it like a smoking gun. The fine print treated it like another unverified shard in a messy mosaic. What mattered wasn't whether it was authentic in that moment. What mattered was how it fit the mood, a story that now had a lab result attached and a public hungry for a character to cast as architect. Corporate statements landed next, the careful kind that say nothing loudly. Partnerships reviewed, affiliations paused, pending further information. Faces that used to share stages with the rapper posted neutral quotes about accountability and family privacy. The machine that builds a career didn't shut down, it just downshifted hard enough to throw everyone forward against their seatbelt. The spouse released a brief message that cut through the fog. Gratitude for support, commitment to protecting her children, and a line about truth being both painful and necessary. Supporters turned it into a banner. The friend went live in tears, insisting she hadn't set fire to a home, insisting she was being swallowed by a storm she didn't know how to navigate. The comments didn't soften. Once an audience decides who is the wound and who is the knife, nuance has a hard time getting a word in. By nightfall, the story had stopped feeling like news and started feeling like gravity. Brands stepped back, playlists were edited, an old interview resurfaced and was rerouted through the present. Every laugh now reading as arrogance, every pause as calculation. People said the city felt different, like a mural had been defaced in the dark. And yet the narrative wasn't done redrawing itself, because once paperwork enters the picture, the internet doesn't just want takes, it wants terms. Paperwork has a way of turning noise into narrative. The filing landed with the weight of a gavel, requests spelled out in clean, unforgiving lines, custody terms, asset disclosures, compensation for public harm and private damage. The spouse didn't posture, she petitioned. Cameras caught her leaving with sunglasses and a spine of steel. Kids shielded by the kind of choreography you only practice when you've had to be strong in public before. Tabloids reduced it to a headline. People who've lived through it recognize the choreography of survival. Money moved next, or more accurately, stopped moving. Partners pressed pause, tour chatter went quiet, and those mutually beneficial relationships switched to under review. Industry pages whispered numbers they couldn't verify. Timelines repeated them until they felt like math. The message underneath was simpler than any spreadsheet. When the story shifts from rumor to record, budgets get moral, or at least they get careful. Meanwhile, the friend's world shrank to a phone screen and a door chain. Lives don't pause gracefully under floodlights, they stutter. She went live again, voice hoarse, words fumbling between explanation and apology, arguing that private choices had become a public bonfire and she was being cast as the arsonist. The comments did not evolve with her. Offline, there were murmurs she might leave the city, start over where her name didn't arrive before she did. Starting over is a romance until it's an address change and a storage unit. Back on the spouse's side, a different rumor began to simmer. A book, not revenge. The T's insisted. Record. There's a market for context when the internet's versions have eaten the original. Talk shows hinted at couches. Podcasts hinted at exclusive. And PR people practiced the phrase speaking her truth like it was a key that fit every lock. If she chose to tell it, the narrative would stop being a storm and start being a map. And in the middle of it all, the rapper stayed quiet enough for the silence to become a character. Statements drafted, then shelved. Apologies rewritten, then reconsidered. When every word is a match, you get careful with friction. The filings were inked, the fallout was weather. And when the storm finally eased, what it left behind wasn't a clean street. It was a new landscape, which is why the conversation that followed wasn't just about who did what. It was about what we saw in the ruins. Cities remember who they celebrate and who they stop clapping for. In the weeks after the filing, the mood shifted from shock to post-quake assessment. Murals, playlists, podcast intros, things that once felt like fixtures suddenly carried a different weight. People argued in barbershops and comment threads about whether this was the biggest implosion in a scene built on loyalty and legacy. Some said the art should stand apart from the chaos. Others said you can't separate the voice from the vows it broke. The spouse's story became a rally point, not a revenge tour, an insistence on boundaries. She talked about protecting children, about refusing to live under rumors she didn't create. Crowds met her with signs that called her a survivor, not a victim. There was a new edge to the support, less pity, more respect. Pain that doesn't turn to power is just a souvenir. She refused to keep it on a shelf. The friend faded at the same speed the spouse ascended, not entirely by choice. When a name turns radioactive, endorsements, invitations, even basic safety start to feel theoretical. She insisted again that she hadn't engineered a downfall, that private promises shouldn't make her a public enemy. But the feed loves symmetry. If one person becomes emblematic of betrayal, someone else becomes a symbol of endurance. The story assigned each role and locked them in. As for the rapper, the crown didn't fall with a single clang, it loosened notch by notch. Longtime allies transitioned to long pauses. The old highlight reels played differently in people's heads. Applause lines became warning signs in hindsight. That's how reputations break, not at once, but everywhere. He remained mostly silent, a strategy that works fine in art and terribly in aftermath. Without a voice, the narrative narrates you. Commentators reach for bigger questions. Why do parasocial bonds make strangers feel like family? Why does show the receipts culture reward outrage faster than context? What do we owe the truth when it stings, and what do we owe the people caught in the echo? No one settled it, but the debate turned the scandal into a mirror, and the audience didn't always love the reflection. So the city adjusted. Fewer sing-alongs, more side-eye, fewer legends recited without footnotes. The dynasty talk, that got replaced with a simpler word, consequence. Because whatever the facts meant to lawyers, the lesson to everyone watching sounded the same. Build on smoke and the first real breeze will take the house. The only question left was the one no headline can answer. After a collapse this public, what counts as a rebuild and who gets to try? In the quiet that follows a storm, the city hears things it missed in the thunder. Car doors closing, news vans leaving, a front gate opening long enough for a family to slip inside and lock it behind them. That's where the story sits now, between what's been said and what can't be unsaid. Maybe there's a statement coming, maybe a book, maybe nothing at all. Rebuilds don't announce themselves, they show up as small choices that either stack into shelter or collapse into more rubble. For the spouse, the path is marked by boundaries, not blame. Protect the kids, protect the truth, protect the name she carries forward. For the friend, it's the calculus of starting over, new routines, new circles, the long work of becoming a person again instead of a headline. And for the rapper, the mirror isn't the algorithm anymore, it's the life that's left when the echoes fade. You can't charm a lab result or outpost a paper trail. You either change or you rehearse your excuses. One builds a future, the other builds a cave. People will argue about legacies and lesson plans for years, but the simplest takeaway is the hardest one to live with. Private choices have public consequences when your life is a broadcast. Screens don't forget they bookmark. And when receipts become records, the story stops being a rumor and starts being a reference. So is the dynasty finished? That depends on whether a dynasty is made of accolades or accountability. Crowns are heavy, so is honesty. Only one of them stays on when the wind picks up. If you've been following every beat of this saga, you know the next chapter won't come from a timeline, it'll come from whatever they do next when the cameras blink. Tap in below. Did the fallout fit the facts? Could anything heal what was torn open? Or is this the rare story that proves some bridges burned too hot to cross again? Subscribe, share, and drop your take, because when the truth finally shows up, it never arrives alone. It brings change, and change is the part of the story no one gets to skip.